your higher self, the display quote from Carl Jung from the beginning. I had a sense of destiny as though my life was assigned to me by fate and had to be fulfilled. This gave me an inner security, and though I could never prove it to myself, it proved itself to me. I did not have this certainty, it had me. For the past 18 months or so, I've been deeply involved in the study of what is known as initiatic science, the principal goal of which is to help the initiate, the student, meaning you and me, know and trust in the higher self. These ancient teachings repeatedly explain that emphasizing only the needs of our physical self and ignoring the needs of the higher self results in the soul and the spirit suffocating and dying of hunger and thirst. The initiates of old insisted on the importance of the knowledge of the higher self because this awareness opens up tremendous possibilities for growth and progress, and yet the ability to have one's own wishes fulfilled. Perhaps it's difficult to imagine yourself so divided as to produce both a higher and a lower self. Very likely, this idea of a self within yourself, which is higher than what you think of as your real self, is foreign to your way of thinking. I have long referred to this lower self, or the false self, as the ego. A part of you that believes you're defined by what you achieve, what you own, or what you win. It's a belief that whatever status you've accumulated is proof that you're a separate being possessing particular strengths or limitations. It probably isn't a surprise that I suggest there are different beliefs that can and will put you on the path of happiness, success, and health that you desire. This idea of having a higher self that transcends the self-descriptor derived from almost universal identification with the ego may be difficult to internalize. If you've listened to the first chapter of this book, then you know that it's necessary that you make the choice. The choice to change what you believe is true. Remind yourself that your current concept of who you are has landed you right here, listening to a book on tape on how to become a more powerful person. Are you willing to internalize radical new ideas that require a shift in your concept of yourself? Are you receptive to the idea of having a higher self that isn't defined by ego concerns? Are you able to entertain the idea of an unlimited higher self that is within you? Can you imagine that you can issue ego's limiting demands that are keeping you stuck in an ordinary level of consciousness? In other words, can you approach the question of who am I with complete unknowing? Conceiving the idea of a higher self begins with this personal inner query. So let's first examine this question of who you are. Who am I? Consider how many bodies you've occupied since birth. Who is the I that continues to leave one body behind and then enter another? You know for certain that you, the person that you call I, the one attempting to figure out who you are, started out in a little baby body weighing somewhere between 5 and 10 lbs. The I that is you fully entered and occupied that little baby body. Gradually you began to discard that baby body and move into a small toddler body that crawled, then it walked, and then ran and took on an entirely new appearance. Your 2-year-old self would find it difficult to recognize the baby body that you'd now completely abandoned. You lived in this toddler body for a while and then discarded it too, including every cell that was in your body at birth. The subsequent body you entered was a prepubescent body that bore a similarity to your toddler body but was completely different. The I in the question still hasn't been discovered, but it's become absolutely clear that you are obviously not your body. Why? Because the I has remained, though it continuously sheds the body that it occupies. This strange phenomenon of you being an I that continuously enters, discards, and re-enters a new body has proceeded right up until this very moment. I'm currently in a 71-year-old body. That's nothing like the body I occupied 50 years ago. I remember well what that 20-year-old body I occupied looked like, and what it could do, and what it knew, and what it didn't know, but I can't find it anywhere. It's simply an illusion. It's gone from this physical world, as is every body that both you and I have occupied in our entire lifetime. The I that I use to describe myself is not so obsessed that he insists upon staying only in one body. In fact, the I that is me finally recognizes the ancient spiritual truth spoken by divine masters since antiquity. None of us are really doing anything. Rather, we, that is our bodies, are merely being done. What is your body being done by? An invisible organizing intelligence that takes the cells of your body, changes them into new cells, and discards the old cells. The I that you think you are observes the entire process, for the most part, helplessly. The physical body that you think of as you is rearranged in a pattern designed by a formless intelligence, independent of your opinion. This I that you use to describe yourself isn't the physical form that you occupy and take with you everywhere. Quantum physics states that the body you're occupying while listening to these words right now is completely different from the body you were in when you listened to the previous paragraph. Such is the nature of the physical world in which we all live. The ancient philosopher Heraclitus put it this way several thousand years ago, and it's true today. All things are in motion, and nothing is at rest. You cannot go into the same river twice. A river is a constantly changing phenomenon, as is a tree, a mountain, a goat, a human, and the entire physical universe, including Earth. That which defines a thing, therefore, is not physical in nature, it's metaphysical. When asked what is real, an ancient spiritual avatar responded without hesitation, that is real which never changes. And since your body is in a continuous state of change, it really isn't real according to this definition. If you try to find that toddler body you once occupied, you realize that it's not real, since it no longer exists. Even while you were in it years ago, you couldn't call it real, because the moment you pinpoint it and define it as real, it would be something else, something new. What you're calling real would already have disappeared. Still, you know, with all of this change taking place, that there is a changeless component to who you are. The I in that toddler body hasn't changed. It's in the body that you currently occupy. The I is your higher self, changeless and real. This higher self is who you are. When you make this discovery and consciously befriend the I that you are, nothing is impossible. In Chapter 1, I explained the necessity of creating a new concept of yourself as an infinite spiritual being having a temporary human experience. As you listen on, keep in mind that if it is changing, it's not real. The I in the question, who am I, isn't anything that involves the physical you, since that continuously changes and disappears. Therefore, to answer the question, who am I, with any reference to your body and its various talents, accomplishments, accumulations, or physical prowess, is to define yourself as unreal. Who you are then must be changeless and therefore birthless as well as deathless. Who you are is a formless energy, a spirit, if you will, with the capacity to be unchanged and at the same time occupy an infinity of bodies. Think about this. It is truly a bewildering phenomenon. You are changeless and therefore real. What you believed were facts explaining who you are simply illusions, or what metaphysicians call unreal. You were convinced by some well-intentioned relatives, teachers, and cultural influences that you really are this ego of yours, when in fact, everything the ego uses to define you is disappearing as fast as you can assess it. Your possessions, your achievements, your reputation, your trophies, your bank accounts, even your family members, including your children, are all aspects of a world that is changing, dissolving to nothingness. All unreal. Here's how a brilliant scribe described this phenomenon poetically. Quote, "This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls, this passive place a summer's nimble mansion, where bloom and bees fulfilled their oriental circuit, then ceased like these." End quote. In this poem, Emily Dickinson reminds you with her dazzling honesty that all ceases and turns to dust. Everything you may have believed was the real you, including the body and all of its accomplishments and even its laughing and sighing. But the real I, that is, you can smile at all of those lower self, ego-identified proceedings. Your higher self exists beyond that lower false self. It is, in fact, higher than all of your earthbound identities. You have a self that can look down from a more exalted position upon that lower ego-dominated self. So begin to know yourself as something far greater than the ever-changing, ever-dying aspects that have dominated your picture of who you are. Who am I is then answered with, I am an infinite being who originated not from my parents, but from a source that is itself birthless, deathless, and changeless. Your connection to source. We have all been created from the same source, and it is my conclusion that we must be like what we came from. It matters not what we call this source. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, is the message in the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching. Call it Tao, call it God, call it Jehovah, call it Divine Mind. It matters not. You are merely interested in recognizing that you originated from the source of all life in a form you know as your constantly changing physical body, which obviously contains the creative energy that you came from. Listen to these words recorded during a 1967 lecture given by an initiatic science master, Omram Mika Ivanov of Bulgaria. Quote, "The Creator has planted within every creature a fragment of himself, a spark, a spirit of the same nature as himself. And thanks to this spirit, every creature can become a creator. And this means that instead of always waiting for their needs to be satisfied by some external source, human beings can work inwardly by means of their thought, their will, and their spirit to obtain the nourishing, healing elements they need. This is why the teaching I bring you is of the spirit of the Creator and not of matter." End quote. I love this quote because it speaks to a part of you that has been largely ignored throughout all of your educational pursuits and accomplishments. The key words here are a fragment of himself, a spark that lies within you but has largely been left unexamined. This is a great image for you to begin to understand the greatness of your higher self. There is a spark of God within you. That is the invisible I've been alluding to. It is that which you cannot grasp with the senses. It beats your heart, it grows your hair, and it keeps your lungs breathing in and out. You've become accustomed to taking it for granted while putting the major focus of your life on the physical. That is the unreal part of you. My objective in this chapter and the next is to inspire you to recognize that a spark, a tiny fragment of the creative source of the universe, is located within you, and to help you increase the power of that spark so it becomes the primary force in your everyday life. Review the first chapter and affirm your willingness to change your concept of yourself to help you recognize and increase that spark. Then dedicate yourself to exploring this higher self that I'm talking about. Your higher self is that spark, but a spark is an infinitesimal portion of your physical being. If you weigh, say, 150 lobbies, that spark weighs maybe 1/100th of an ounce or 1/1000,000th of an ounce. This is only a symbolic image because the spark is unchanging. But I'm encouraging you to conceptualize that spark of God inside of you. Imagine it growing to double its size, then a tenfold spark, then maybe a shred, then a segment, then a chunk, then a lump, then a piece, then a section, and just perceive that spark of God as the real you becoming visible through your loving and inviting attentiveness until you feel the sacred presence of your higher self as the guiding light of your life. Ultimately, as I'll talk about later, it will overtake the you that's been dominated by an ego and your sensory apparatus. That former speck of a spark will become the foundation of your life. You might conceptualize this former spark as a sacred light inside of your head that is the same size as your brain. Now, you've had a big piece of God to assist you in attaining a status wherein the fulfillment of your wishes becomes a no-brainer. Or perhaps you'd call it a new-brainer. This new brain is comprised exclusively of infinite God energy, your higher self at work every day. I want you to seriously contemplate another observation made by the initiatic spiritual master Omram Mika Ivanov in a lecture given in January of 1971. This is a lecture that I've listened to too many times. Quote, "Our higher self is perfect, omniscient, and almighty. A fragment of God himself, a pure, transparent, luminous quintessence." End quote. This will very likely be a challenge for you as you consider a new concept of yourself by accepting some truths that you have been raised to believe are falsehoods. Yet I ask you to study this ancient spiritual teaching, which is designed to familiarize you with a radical idea about the powers you possess just by the fact that you are a living, breathing human being. If you are committed to accessing your higher consciousness, then you must be willing to do what is required in order to integrate what this great initiatic teacher is offering in order to accomplish becoming an almighty being. Your higher self, that is God, must be enlarged from a spark to a more meaningful portion of your essence. Since you are a piece of God and therefore have that within you, you needn't doubt your own divinity. As Jesus reminds you in the New Testament, "Is it not written in your law, I have said you are gods?" And that's from the book of John 10:34. As a growing spark of God, you must be willing to say, that portion of myself that has not edged God out, that is ego, must be perfect. It is all-knowing and it is almighty. There is nothing that this higher self that I am cannot accomplish. Once again, let's look back at something Jesus told us. Quote, "With God all things are possible." That's in the book of Matthew 19:26. All things are possible, leaves nothing out. As my teachers in the initiatic sciences frequently reminded me, this higher self, that portion of God that is us, only begins to notice us and give us the attention we crave when we enlarge it from a tiny spark and invite that energy into our life. Your awareness that God isn't something external to you, but rather a portion of yourself, is truly a giant step in your spiritual evolution. You can tell yourself with genuine knowing, I am perfect.